Thanks again for joining Professor Kulkarni this
Yeah.
evening as we continue your presentation on Indian knowledge system, focusing on the linguistic analysis of Sanskrit grammar.
So once again, I express my gratitude to the institution, that is Ayuka. Also, in the previous talk, I tried to explain to you what is Indian knowledge systems. And I also took Indian knowledge system as an example of a linguistic phenomenon and how we try to deal with such phenomena by analyzing them, by comparing them into the constituents and how those constituents get related. Now, the process that I did last time, the one that I told you about, I talked about, is purely algorithmic. If you have noticed, we draw brackets, square brackets, and in those square brackets, there are some meaning elements, and those meaning elements are related to each other in a systematic manner. And then outside of that bracket, there is some other element which is also linked with this entire bracket. Now, when the bracket is consisting of two elements, obviously there are two parts. When it assumes the status of one unit, namely knowledge systems as one unit, it starts acting as one unit. And now the question comes in, namely, what kind of correlation these parts have with this one unit. So if this is becoming one unit out of two, this one unit will get denoted by which of the parts? I mean, which amongst the two parts will be the denoter of the one unit? Will it be, um, let's say, knowledge is A and systems is B? Will A denote the unit together, or will B denote the unit together? Or will both A and B will stand for the one unit thus formed, or something else which is not present in these two can stand as the head or the one element for that one unit. So this is quite an interesting problem, interesting challenge as far as linguistic analysis is concerned. And this has been going on for so many years, for over 2000 years, I should say. Even the modern stream of linguistics has benefited quite a lot because of the contact it had with the Sanskrit grammatical system and the exercises, the analysis, the overall methodology adopted in the Sanskrit grammatical tradition. It is of precisely this kind. And as you could observe, and as I expressed it in typical term, it is primarily an algorithmic process. There is some kind of algorithm that is working here, underlying here as a principle with which we proceed. So knowledge systems is one unit now, and then we add Indian to it. And so where do we link this Indian? And I said that we link it to systems. We can also link it to knowledge, but he currently says link it to systems. So these are Indian systems. And by Indian, we mean something that is developed in India indigenously. And even though this term does not have a temporal or a spatial kind of reference, nonetheless, it does entail such a reference where we are primarily talking about the overall viewpoint that has been imposed by the coming into contact of the non-Indian knowledge systems, primarily the Western knowledge systems and their beliefs and their foundations. So it is extremely important for us to categorize what these Indian knowledge systems are, what are the basis, what are the foundations, and on the basis of those, we can clearly figure out uh, the patterns and figure out the discoveries and so on and so forth. We took a very broad view over here, an academic view, I would say, uh, by addressing these questions. Did everything that we have or know today already exist in India? And the plain answer, simple answer to this question is no. At the same time, did nothing that we have today exist in India? Answer to this question is also no. Did something exist in India? And the answer is yes. And that is what primarily we are studying. That is what is our aim. So to make it known to us and make us aware of the existence of such systems is what is the primary goal of Indian knowledge systems. So we said that there were these three domains in which systems existed in India long time back. And most importantly, many of these systems, they have influenced knowledge, not just in India, but also perhaps all over the world. And the British colonialists coming into contact with the Sanskrit grammars in Bengal primarily did affect quite a lot of the theories and the beliefs the linguists had. And as I said last time, it was Sir William Jones who proposed the theory of language family after he closely studied Sanskrit in Bengal in 1780, 80s and so on. And of course, after all, um, we have Ferdinand de Saussure, who studied Paninian grammar and was a teacher of Sanskrit in Switzerland. And he is considered to be the father of modern linguistics, where we clearly see certain principles advocated in the Paninian grammatical tradition, clearly adopted and borrowed and so on and so forth. So we also talked about certain methodologies that are discussed in the Paninian grammatical tradition. Anvaya Vyatireka is the one, Avapa Udvapa, Tantra Yukti, Sutra Bhashya style, and Adhikarana style. We started dealing with language as a phenomenon, language as a subject of study, and first of all, we looked at various aspects of language. We said that the language, according to the Indian thinkers, has got multiple facets. The most outside, objectively available facet of this phenomenon called language is the system of sounds, the strings of sounds that are uttered by individuals in order to express, in order to communicate. Those are primarily called languages, primarily. And then for those people who are impaired in those faculties, the question arises whether they also have the faculty of language or not. And the naive believer would say that they don't have any language, but linguistic tradition doesn't believe so. Definitely, the Sanskrit grammatical tradition, which is current and which is living, also does not believe so. Why? Because the theories of Sanskrit traditional grammars believe that what we actually hear, what is audible, is just the external aspect of language, external part of language. There is quite a lot of internal aspect related to this external part, which needs to be looked at, which needs to be carefully studied, which needs to be analyzed, and so on and so forth. Now, it is this internal part which is extremely important. And so we say that Bhasha, which is the external, which is highlighting the external part of the language, the audible sounds, Vach and Vani are the ones which talk about the internal aspect of that external part. So the question here is, what kind of relationship exists between the external sound systems, and the internal systems. Is there some kind of relationship of that kind? And the Indian grammatical tradition does not hesitate in spelling out that particular relationship as well. The internal aspect of language, according to the Indian grammatical tradition, is the real sense of the term language. That is what is necessarily a language. The external sense of language, namely bhasha, is what is a mere expression which can be changed. And for those people where the faculty of hearing is not available, they might have some other expression in order to give expression to the internal linguistic faculty. So that internal linguistic faculty becomes extremely valuable, extremely important. And this is what is also visible to us through various channels in our modern democratic setup and modern democratic society, where we try to express something which is there inside our internal cognitive apparatus by external expressions. Most notable is the current one that we did in Maharashtra yesterday, where we went ahead in the political sphere of the society and exercised our right, and we expressed something. All of the population of Maharashtra exercised a right and expressed something that existed in the internal cognitive apparatus of the population which lives here. Now, what that is, what that cognitive faculty is, that will be revealed on the 23rd, that is Saturday, and that we um, will then say that this is what was intended by the people of Maharashtra and was expressed by something, by this act of voting, where we go and they apply ink to our finger and so on and so forth. The bottom line is what lies inside the head, what lies within the cognitive apparatus is what is language in the simple terms. This was very much clear to the Indian thinkers at an early date, and probably that is not what is so significantly um, available to the philosophers in the West about language. We talked about three broad fields: Shabda Prakriya, Artha Prakriya, and the Jnana Prakriya. So the word Prakriya stands for the process of Shabdas, process of Arthas, and the process of Jnana. So how a human being cognizes, how the meaning gets constructed, and how the words get constructed. In the previous talk, I referred to the top to bottom approach and the bottom to top approach as well. So when we take the sentence as an input and then we analyze it, we go from top to bottom, where a sentence is segmented using some criterion in terms of the meaning, avapa and udvapa, as well as anvaya and vyatireka. A sentence is segmented into the words. Now, these words are once again segmented into the constituents. In modern linguistics, what are called morphemes or morphs. And however, in the Sanskrit grammatical tradition, we have prakriti and pratyaya and so on. So, such a segmentation from top to bottom, analyzing a sentence, is of course analysis. And now you can use the same procedure, procedure, to also do the synthesis, where you go from bottom to top. So you collect those atoms, linguistic atoms, as I call them. You collect those, join them together, and from those smallest units, you prepare the bigger unit in the form of the words. Then you also join those words together can prepare the unit called a sentence. And this is how, from bottom to top, you synthesize and you generate the sentence. So this is the Shabda Prakriya that we talked about. Now, this Shabda Prakriya doesn't work in vacuum, primarily because there is the condition, necessary condition, in the form of the meaning which plays in the background. And so there is the process of the construction of the meaning, which is also going on. And there is a one-to-one correspondence between this Shabda Prakriya and also this Artha Prakriya. So just as a sentence gets divided into the words, that happens primarily because the sentence meaning is divided into the word meanings. So the first process happens is that on the Artha Prakriya is on the meaning, where sentence meaning is conceived by the speaker, and that sentence meaning is analyzed, is segmented into the word meanings, and the word meanings are then segmented into the meanings of the morphs. This is also done by the hearer or the listener, also the speaker, who is also the hearer and listener, and the speaker also constructs the meanings in the reverse order in order to reach the meaning of the sentence. So from the smaller units and their meanings, so smaller meaning units, the speaker constructs a broader one unit, and such units are then once again stitched together in order to form the sentence meaning, remember. And now this is sentence meaning becomes a necessary condition in order to give rise to the sentences which we already talked about right now. So sentence meaning comes first, followed by the shabda, the sentences, and that is how the process continues. Now, the Sanskrit grammatical tradition also believes that there is also the cognitive process involved in it. There is also the jnana prakriya. So the cognition of the artha and the shabda, which is what plays a crucial role as far as the generation of the shabdas and generation of the arthas. So jnana prakriya is an extremely important process in this regard. So the Sanskrit grammatical tradition works in these three broad fields. Artha Prakriya and the Jnana Prakriya can fall under what is known today as philosophy of language. Though the word perhaps sometimes may be misleading um, to some, because they might look for certain things which perhaps are not the major concerns of the Indian thinking. And also derivation of speech form. This is extremely important because there are variations in various forms, various words, and those variations need to be also justified in a rule-based system. For example, in English, if we consider ed as a generic suffix which denotes past tense, then the system must have some scope to account for the variations where ed is not used. Sometimes there is just a change of the vowel which brings about the past tense. For example, if you have look, general pattern is looked, book, booked, pick, picked, and so on. But if you have eat, it becomes ate as the past tense. So it doesn't become eated, it becomes ate. If you have go, the past tense is not good, it becomes went. Now, as far as the linguist is concerned, as far as the system of grammar is concerned, we would want to explain away these facts with some rule-based system, of course. So generally, we say that in English, ed is the generic suffix denoting past tense, but there are some exceptions. For example, eat doesn't become eated. Go doesn't become good. And these are treated as exceptions. So now, how do we formulate rules in order to account for such exceptions? And there are some exceptions, of course. So this is just an example to allow you some inroad into what goes on into the head of the grammarian who analyzes the linguistic data in front of him, where people speak different languages. I mean, people speak the same language with different varieties and different tones and so on. And therefore, then to account for all such factors needs some kind of system which accounts for these things, which binds them together, strives for brevity, and does take into care the cost one may incur by adopting a policy to describe everything in detail. Of course, that is a problem that the linguists encounter, and therefore they simply look for a rule-based system where generic and exceptional forms, exceptional rules will be stated. These are the three broad fields. Now, the rules might explain away the forms, the rules might explain the meanings, but these are also the rules which talk about how the cognitive process of the speakers shaped in a particular manner. Sometimes you see in the languages we have duplications, and those duplications are many times redundant, but sometimes they also have some hidden meaning. For example, in um, in Marathi, the word suruvat is used, which is quite close to Hindi shuruvat. Now, this means beginning. Now, if you try to look at the meaning of survat means beginning, of course. Beginning means something which was not done before and which is done hereafter. That can be called the beginning. Okay, that action, that phenomenon, that can be called as the beginning. Now, in the Puneri Marathi, the Marathi language that is spoken in Pune, we also hear uh, the phrase Pahili Shurvat, okay, the first beginning. So now what is the meaning of first beginning, right? The beginning is obviously first. The beginning is going to be first, right? The first occurrence. The beginning is not going to be the second occurrence. If it is second, then it's not a beginning. I mean, so beginning is always first. But then the Puneri Marathi has got this variation, namely Pahili Survat. So now, how do we account for this Pahili Survat? Then we have to take into consideration the fact that in human life, it so happens, sometimes very strangely, that there are several beginnings. So, for example, now as we are approaching the year end, there will be lots of resolutions that people will do. Okay, come next year, I will start doing this, I will start doing that, I will stop doing this, I will stop doing that, and all that, and so on and so forth. Now, most of the resolutions, they are followed till, let's say, second week of January or third week of January. And then the common experience is that afterwards, those resolutions remain in the head, or sometimes if written down in the new year diaries and so on and so forth. So if we look at such a phenomenon, we observe that every year people regularly resolve to do something, but it doesn't work out that way. So every year there is a beginning. That means you have several beginnings. At the beginning of each year, you had some resolution. So there were several resolutions at the beginning of the year. That means there were several beginnings. And now, if you want to talk about when exactly you started the beginnings, when exactly you started to resolve, now you can go back in terms of history and say that, well, that was the first point when I started doing these resolutions. And so that is what is now my pehli shuruaat. Okay, that is what is my first beginning. That is when I started resolving and something like that. So you see, why did the people of Pune choose this particular way of expressing? Because their cognitive apparatus allows them to go take this particular shape, and that is the reason why they add the so-called redundant, apparently redundant qualification to the word beginning. So this is what the Jnana Prakriya will uh, try to explain, and this is what uh, is the principle involved in what we call the Jnana Prakriya stated in the Sanskrit grammatical tradition, which is not just applicable to Sanskrit only, but is applicable overall to language in general as a phenomenon. We also talked about, and we ended last time on this slide, where we said that there are 10 plus grammarians known to Panini. Of course, when we do research nowadays, we have to primarily talk about, uh, we have primarily have to do a survey of literature where we have to go through literature and bring out facets of the existing literature, identify the research gap, and justify the why the research is being carried out by you, and so on and so forth. So obviously, we need to have the knowledge of the previous scholars and their works. And if that is true, as far as today's grammarians are concerned and scholars are concerned, that was very well true as far as Panini is concerned. There were 10 plus grammarians known to Panini, and there were 10 plus non-Paninian traditions of Sanskrit grammar. Remember, these 10 plus grammarians who were known to Panini, they are at 500 BCE. Since then, several grammarians and several scholars have studied this particular tradition, have become part of the tradition, and that is the reason why this tradition keeps on continuing and keeps on thinking and bringing new additions to the overall thought process and the development of the thought of the language. At the same time, it is also visible that there are 10 plus non-Paninian traditions of Sanskrit grammar. So Paninian tradition is not the only one. It is one of the 10 plus grammatical traditions available. And if this is the stage of Sanskrit, so also is the case with several other languages in India. For example, the beautiful grammar of Tamil in the form of the grammar called Tolkappiyam, that is also an important grammar, and scholars have also worked on the exploration of the relationship of Paninian grammatical tradition and this Tamil grammatical tradition. Some scholars in France I know who have worked on this, and some in US and in UK I know who have also worked on these particular topics. Now hereafter we will take a tour of these various scholars who developed the thought about language in the broad fields that we saw earlier in the previous slide, the Shabda Prakriya, the Artha Prakriya, and the Jnana Prakriya. So, according to the modern systems, the use of grammar is to correct your spellings and correct your structure and so on and so forth, and teach you how to form a valid sentence and so on and so forth. That is correct. That's not wrong. But according to the Sanskrit grammatical tradition, it is not just, as we said earlier, it is not just the external expression which is what gains significance, but rather the internal cognitive apparatus, which is what is important. So if you initially cognize something in a particular structured manner, only then the pronunciation or the auditory expression will follow suit in the desired manner. So if there is clarity in the cognitive apparatus, the same clarity gets reflected in the speech that is audible. If there is less clarity or no clarity at all at the cognitive apparatus level, that also gets reflected in the chaotic expression that is available of a particular speaker. So here are some of the authors and some of the texts in the Paninian grammatical tradition, which we shall be dealing with, and we'll be bringing out some salient features of these great tradition and these texts. The first and the foremost of this particular tradition is Panini, of course, who lived around 5th century BCE. He composed a text called Ashtadhyayi. Ashtadhyayi is a word which states that this is a text composed in 8 chapters. Each chapter is further divided into 4 subchapters. Therefore, there are 32 subchapters. Each subchapter consists of some rules, which are also known as sutras. So there are sutras in this particular text. And this text of Panini's grammar uh, had a privilege of getting of becoming a part of the Vedic tradition, where this entire text was memorized first and then was transmitted through the oral tradition to the next generation, and from there to the next generation onwards, and so on and so forth. There are in all almost 4,000 sutras in a very tertiary, in a very terse style. Some of them are quite small, monosyllabic. Sutras like Chau and so on, they are monosyllabic, but they do contain a lot of meaning. And as we saw earlier, some examples we took, they primarily talk about the relationship of the meaning and the word. At the same time, the compositionality aspect of the linguistic units, where the meanings are composed and correspondingly the words are also composed. So compositionality plays a very crucial role. Compositionality plays an extremely important part as far as the system of grammar building is concerned. And this is what we are also following in modern era, where even building various programs related to the natural language processing, such relationships and the compositionalities are primarily kept in mind, and where the programs uh, are supposed to deliver the outputs, the compositionality comes into play even when the evaluation happens. And that compositionality obviously keeps track of the meaning and the word relationship. So this is very much visible in the text called Ashtadhyayi, composed by Panini around 5th century BCE, around 4,000 sutras, divided into 32 chapters. If I can talk about this text in brief, I can say that the remarkable feature of this text is widely recognized by modern computer scientists who hail it as the first programmed grammar of any language on the earth. Now, the computer scientist, notably, I can take one name, uh, and I can also cite to you his paper. He is from France. He is a noted computer scientist who is working in Paris, near Paris, an institution called INRIA Rocancourt. He works there, and he has published an article where he openly claims this, and he has some other quote also where he claims this particular fact. I have heard him speak also. These words from him I have heard. Now, I am not very much surprised because the construction of this particular text primarily reminds oneself of such a programmed structure, programmed algorithm, and the input and output mechanism available in it. Now, there is, as I said to you, there are 32 subchapters. One of the remarkable features of this particular system is that the first 29 subchapters, and the last three subchapters, they are arranged in a unique and peculiar relationship. And that relationship is of the following kind. So for the first 29 subchapters, the last three subchapters do not exist at all. Look at this very remarkable kind of arrangement. The first 29 subchapters have the rules in them. Now, for these rules, the rules stated in the last three subchapters are as if non-existent. For the last three subchapter rules, however, the rules stated in the first 29 subchapters are existent. What it means is that in the overall grammatical process, in the overall process of the derivation or the synthesis of the units, the rules available in the last three subchapters are to be applied only at the end of the derivation process. And otherwise, in general, the output of a particular rule in the overall system of Panini becomes an input for some other rule. This is how it works. An output of a system, output of a rule becomes an input for another rule. Now, as far as these two sections are concerned, the first 29 and the last three, in these, the first 29 sections and the rules stated therein, their output can definitely become an input as far as the last three subchapters are concerned. But the output of the rules available in the last three subchapters cannot become the input for the rules stated in the first 29 subchapters. This is something remarkable, and the development of this particular technique in the grammar of Panini at 5th century BCE is remarkable. And this tells quite a lot about hiding certain rules and treating certain exception rules. So rules could be of different kinds. There are some rules which define technical terms. There are some rules which will also define some meta-linguistic principles. There will be some rules which will prescribe certain operation, and there will be some other rules which will talk about some special techniques. There is something called inheritance. They will also talk about that, and that is how those rules will progress. Now, the rules which are stated in the last three subchapters, they are such that their output cannot become the input for the rules. in the first 29 subchapters. This is something very unique, something remarkable.
Professor Kulkarni,
Yes.
can I interrupt a bit?
Yeah, yeah.
I was wondering when you say that these of the last three sub chapters, the rules don't apply, do you mean the first 29 at times break them as well, or they are not just applied?
Uh, can you please repeat the last part of your question? The first part I got, the
Yeah, I
last
was just
words I missed.
wondering,
Yeah,
when you
please.
say they don't apply in the first 29 subsections,
Hmm.
you mean that it is explicitly broken or just not needed?
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that, see, every rule in the Paninian grammatical system takes something as an input, and the rule then processes the material and presents something as an output. That is how the general system works. Now, what I'm trying to say is that, and what Panini's system says is that the the rules in the first 29 subchapters, they cannot take the outputs of the rules available in the last three subchapters as input. That is the point. So the rules in the last three subchapters also have some outputs. And these outputs of different rules generally become inputs for different other rules. That is also a natural process. But this doesn't work as far as the last three subchapters are concerned. That is um, how that is how it works in the overall system of the Ashtadhyayi, and that is the reason why I'll give you an example. Most of us have some time in our life gone through the text of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Now, what is the first line that we hear in Srimad Bhagavad Gita? The first line is Dhritarashtra Uvacha. And then comes the line Sanjaya Uvacha. Okay, Dhritarashtra Uvacha, there is one verse and there is a reply by Sanjaya. So Sanjaya Uvacha. Let us take this line, Sanjaya Uvacha. Now, Dhritarashtra Uvacha, let us keep it aside because Dhritarashtra is a little bit difficult word and Sanjaya is little bit relatively easy word. Please don't extract any political meaning out of it. So let us talk about Sanjaya Uvacha. Now here, if you go break this sentence Sanjaya Uvacha into its constituents, then you will say the first word is Sanjayaha, Sanjaya with a visarga, and Uvacha is the second word. Now what happens to this visarga? That is the point. Now this Sanjaya visarga plus Uvacha happens to be an input for a rule stated in the last three subchapters. And the output of this particular rule in the last three subchapters is, for I can also specify the rule. It is 8319. Now for this 8319, the visarga ultimately is deleted, and that is the output. So Sanjayaha Uvacha is the input. There are some technicalities involved. I am not giving all that. Sanjayaha Uvacha is the input, and Sanjaya Uvacha is the output. Now this Sanjaya Uvacha is the output of 8319. Now there are rules in 6.1, for example 6.187, which says that when a is followed by u, they both are substituted by o. Okay, and you will have so many examples of this kind. When a plus e is followed by when a is followed by e, they both are replaced by a. We have so many examples like Ganesha, Suresha, Ramesha, etc. of this kind. And similarly, when A is followed by U, they both get replaced by O. This is 6187, remember. Now, 8319 gave us an output in the form of Sanjaya Uvacha. Now, this system in Paninian grammar tells us that this output of 8319 cannot become the input of 6187. Had it become the input of 6187, we would have got Sanjayovacha, okay, which is not what is stated, which is not how the speakers of Sanskrit speak. That's not the pattern in their speech. Now, this is accounted for by the grammar of Panini by by taking a systemic step. The system is developed in such a manner where there is an input and output system mechanism, and the output of such a rule becomes an input for some other rule. Now, this gets suspended when the rule happens to be the one coming from the last three subchapters. So, the last three subchapters can take any input provided by, any input that is an output of any rule, other rule in the Ashtadhyayi. However, the output of these rules cannot become the input of any rule in the first 29 subchapters. This is how the grammar works. Now, this is a real test example for you, just to give you a glimpse of what kind of system this is and how this system is composed of. And remember, this was composed in 5th century BCE. And of course, we don't have words like input, output, etc. But definitely we have these mechanisms where the output of one sutra becomes the input of the second sutra, and that is how the sutras apply. And then we treat sutras also as animate, and those sutras also come into conflict with each other. And then we enter into a rich field of artificial intelligence. This is nothing but artificial intelligence in a way, where there is a mechanical algorithmic procedure where there is some kind of intelligence generated by computing, computational process. And then, of course, a particular option is chosen as the output, and then that is returned as the required necessary word form generated by the people, by the speakers. Have I answered your question?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks a lot. The example really helped understand it better.
Okay. I think that is a good test example. Without going into further details, let me proceed further, and let us talk about some other scholars who who commented upon these sutras. And you see, and there are various other features. So when you have a derivation system, so in the example Sanjaya Uvacha, we just focused on one simple facet, one simple step, which comes only at the end. But what Paninian grammar will do is that it will bracket both these words, Sanjaya Uvacha, and then it will start the derivation of this particular sentence right from its constituents. So, for example, Sanjaya is a nominal root followed by some suffix. Let's take su as the suffix. Uvacha is derived from the verbal root vacha, to which is added the suffix lit. So we have Sanjaya plus su, vacha plus lit as the beginning. And then some rules will apply. So for example, on the nominal side, we have Sanjaya plus ru. And on the verbal side, we have vacha plus lit, and lit is substituted by t is substituted by a, and there are rules which will do all this. So now we have Sanjaya plus Ru, Vacha plus A, then Ru becomes Visarga, Ru becomes Ya, Sanjaya plus Ya, and we have Vacha Vacha A. Now this Ya is deleted, Sanjaya, and this Vacha Vacha A becomes U Vacha A, and then U Vacha A, and Uvacha. Now this entire phrase gets derived and generated. This is how the Paninian grammar will derive the entire phrase, the entire sentence called Sanjaya Uvacha, and this is how it will generate from the basic constituents. This is how it will generate all the sentences in Sanskrit. Now, this is extremely significant because we are taking meanings as the necessary conditions for this generation. And the process is happening on the word side of it. However, it does not neglect the meaning conditions processing. However, what we are trying to do here is that we are trying to explain the process, the cognitive process that undergoes within the heads of the speakers of Sanskrit, where there are some variations that are available to us. And those variations are also treated in a particular manner. These are also treated in the form of the exceptions to the generic rules. So, for example, if we look at if you look at, let's say, the nominal conjugations, where there are 21 forms, 7 vibhaktis, and 3 numbers, Prathama, Dvitiya, Tritiya, Chaturthi, Panchami, Shashti, Saptami, 7 vibhaktis, and Ekavachan, Dvivachan, and Bahuvachan, 3 vachanas, and you have those forms like Ramaha, Ramau, Ramaha, Prathama, Ramam, Ramau, Raman, Dvitiya, Ramena, Ramabhyam, Ramaihi, Tritiya. And now if you look at this Ramaihi, this is the instrumental plural form, Ramaihi. Now, if you look at all other paradigms, say the words ending in E, the instrumental plural form is Hari Bhihi. U, and the form is Guru Bhihi. Ru, the form is Dhatru Bhihi. And Go Bhihi, and so on. All other forms. There are more than 25 such paradigms in which you will find Bhihi as the right hand side element. There is only one paradigm, that is Rama, in which you find Aihi as the final element. So Ramaihi versus Haribhihi, Gurubhihi, Dhatrubihi, Gobhihi, and so on and so forth. So you see now there are 24 traditions, for example, which are having Bhihi as the final element, and one paradigm which has got Aihi as the final element. Now, how does a grammarian account for such variations? The easiest way Panini has dealt with is that he has treated this one as an exception. So when he starts the derivation process of all the 30, 25, 26 paradigms, he takes them as one unit, and he states that for the slot 3 slot instrumental plural, we have bhis or bhihi as the starting element. This is how we start the derivation. Now, as far as those 24, 25 paradigms, there is no need to change anything. Bhihi remains as it is. But when it comes to the first paradigm, Bhihi is substituted by Aihi. Now, this is where you need to come up with some rule. This is why the rule is required, because this is how the grammatical, the linguistic material is arranged. This is how the speakers of Sanskrit have spoken. So then we have the rule Ato Bhisa Ais, 7-1-10, which comes into play and treats this exception in a peculiar manner, also stating the necessary conditions and also stating the operation and operand on which this particular operation is going to happen. So there are various features of this particular text, and this is how the sentences get derived. No wonder that this particular text and the overall system that attracted scholars, and in fact that attracted a big tradition. The text then became the subject of study, and that continues even till this date. So this is about Ashtadhyayi and its basic features uh, are some of them. I have briefly stated them for you. So remember, such a system existed. Also, there was a system where um, the development happened in the form of the meta language. So Panini developed a meta linguistic system. So you see, there is a language and there is a meta language. The language is the one that is spoken by the speakers of that particular language, and meta language is the language describing the language. Now, you can develop this meta language in a systemic manner such that there is a system that is created. So you create tags using which your system works. And so Panini has effectively carved out a meta language for his grammar, which provides multiple triggers for multiple operations to take place. Now let us move ahead, go to Katyayana. Katyayana flourished around 300 BCE, and he wrote glosses discussing Paninian sutras, Paninian rules. And sometimes these glosses stated the historical facts that were prevalent in Katyayana's time. So the grammatical tradition at the time of Katyayana was a free-flowing tradition, which means that it was ready to accept newly developed forms, and therefore it was ready to discuss whether certain forms have stopped circulation, and therefore the sutra in Paninian grammar, which was to account for such stopped circulation forms, they are whether needed or not. So Katyayana does not hesitate in making remarks that such sutras are not needed, and therefore those elements in the sutras, or sometimes even the entire sutras, they become redundant, and therefore they should be refuted. And some scholars later on also think that they should be removed from the text of the Ashtadhyayi. However, the overall tradition, general tradition, does not think of removing such refuted sutras in the Ashtadhyayi. We note it down only as a reminder of the historical overview of the grammarians. So Katyayana thinks that certain sutras are obsolete primarily because the forms they were accounting for are no longer in use. This is very much a phenomenon which also happens in modern times when there are some words that we were uh, that we were using in our communication quite a lot, and now we don't use them. So those words are almost lost. For example, there was an era when we used to celebrate Diwali. Oh, sorry, there was an era where the political campaigning used to happen at the time of election through inland letters. There was an era where people used to communicate with each other using inland letters. Okay, inland letters. This was a word that was very much in use, inland letters. But now, if you ask the modern generation what is an inland letter, they probably will be completely bowled over. They probably will be completely uh, shocked to hear that there existed such a word. What is an inland letter? They will ask you because they have never seen such an object, and they don't even know that such a concept existed, and also that people used to communicate using such inland letters, because primarily the function that they used to do is now taken over by emails and by digital communication, which is so faster and so effective and accessible and so on and so forth. And that is the reason why we may soon lose the word inland later. That is a danger that we have. This is how the words lose currency, and the grammarian's job is to take note of them and then, of course, account for the speech. Now, in Panini's case, there were such words which were prevalent in his time, so he took note of them, composed sutras which will generate such forms. Katyayana, however, observed that some of such forms they are obsolete, they are not being spoken by the Sanskrit speakers of his time, and therefore we don't need sutras. So, see, he was very bold. He didn't get bogged down by the overall systemic greatness of Paninian grammar. He was very much on ground, so he could say that, well, this is not needed. Let us remove this, and so on and so forth. So this was just one aspect, but there were several other suggestions he made, several other explanations he provided. He provided the philosophy behind the system of Paninian grammar. He was the first one to talk about the usefulness of the overall system. What is the use of the system? He was the first one to discuss what is the definition of a sentence. So Panini uses the word vakya in his grammar, but he never defines what is a vakya. It fell on Katyayana's shoulders to define what is a vakya, and he rightly performed his duty and carried out his responsibility. And there are several facets of this kind for which Katyayana is ever remembered by the grammatical tradition. So his work is known as Vartika or glosses. Then comes Patanjali, the next important sage, important scholar in this tradition of luminaries. He flourished around 150 BCE, and he wrote a commentary called Mahabhashya, also the great commentary. Patanjali commented on the sutras commented by Katyayana primarily, and there were around 1,300 sutras out of the 4,000 ones in the Paninian grammar, which Katyayana had commented. And so Patanjali also commented on most of those, or almost all of them, commented by Katyayana. Now, Patanjali discussed the ideas of Katyayana threadbare, examining them in detail, examining also the ideas propounded by Panini, giving the overall shape to the system of Panini, discussing various things, notably when the rule conflict arises. Panini has evolved a system where the rule conflict resolution also happens. So Patanjali, of course, with Vartikas, Patanjali was instrumental in giving a proper shape to all these discussions, how the rule conflict is resolved. There are two rules which operate. Uh, of course, every rule operates in a certain environment. Now, it may happen that two rules and the environment of those two rules get some overlap. Now, what is to be done in this area of overlap? That is a question. So, the area where there is no overlap, each rule can apply. But where there is an overlap, there we need to formulate some principle so that there will be a decisive action taken by the system in which one output can be generated and the system doesn't get hanged. And so these principles, they were clearly spelled out by Patanjali. Patanjali also elaborated on the concept of Vakya. Patanjali also elaborated on the concept of Samartha, Karaka, and so on and so forth. That's why Patanjali is considered to be the greatest commentator on the grammar of Panini. And therefore now, Panini, Katyayana, and Patanjali, these three scholars form a trinity, and these three are called the three munis of Paninian grammar: Panini, Katyayana, and Patanjali. and their statements are considered to be of supreme importance to the Paninian grammatical tradition. And rightly so, this is called Mahabhashya because it is a Mahabhashya. It is a great commentary, great Bhashya. There are 85 chapters in this commentary, and I uh, and these chapters are named as Anhika. What the word Anhika stands for is that a curriculum that is to be finished over in a day. Anhika is something that is to be finished in a day. But it is an experience that one such Anhika is prescribed in the university curricula in several universities for the entire year. However, I must tell you, I must share a personal and a very illuminating experience for me when I was teaching in the as a as a lecturer, as an assistant professor in the Department of Sanskrit and Prakrit languages at the then University of Pune. Uh, we experimented, and I tried to teach this one Anhika, one chapter of the Mahabhashya in one day, and I could do that. I could finish teaching that one chapter in one day, but I had to start teaching at 8 a.m. in the morning. And as the office was not open, the classrooms were not open, we started in the boys' hostel, one room where some of the students were residing. So we started there. Once we reached 11 a.m., we came to the department office and used the classrooms. And then we parted for lunch, came back, and then we continued till 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. And as everything got closed, we once again went to another hostel, sat there till 8 p.m. And by that time, then we finished teaching. I finished teaching this one chapter of the Mahabharata. That is a personal anecdote I am happy to share it with you all. But otherwise, this Mahabharata is indeed very difficult text. Several scholars have tried translating this text in various languages. There is only one language in which this text is completely translated. That happens to be Marathi language, in which Ahamopadhyaya Vasudev Shastri Abhyankar translated it and published in 7 volumes, and that is also available in many parts of the world. I personally remember to have seen a copy of this particular translation at the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. Anyway, coming back to the Trimuni, Panini, Katyayana, and Patanjali, these are the three main munis of Paninian grammatical tradition. So, Paninian grammatical tradition is known as Trimuni Vyakarana because of these three great scholars. Then we come to another very crucial scholar called Bhartrhari, who flourished around 500 CE, Common Era. Now, you see, from Patanjali at 150 BCE onwards, almost 600 years, 700 years, there is nothing available. Probably because the historical records got destroyed in the course of time, and therefore there is nothing available. However, in the text, we do definitely find references to some texts, but those texts are not available. But then comes Bhartrhari, who composed a seminal text called Vakyapadiya in 3 chapters. One of the unique texts, very important text, and primarily propounded the philosophy of language. Notable of his theories being Shabda Brahmavad. So he propounded the theory of Shabda Brahmavad. Shabda is the Brahma. That is the theory he proposed. And then later on, um he also explained different phenomena in the language from the point of view of this particular philosophy. That was an extremely important addition. And as I said earlier, Ferdinand de Saussure, the scholar who is considered to be the father of modern linguistics, was in close touch with Bhartrhari. I mean, not historically, not personally, of course, but with the text composed by Bhartrhari. And so there is quite a lot of chance, there is quite a lot of factual uh, part where Ferdinand de Saussure got influenced by the ideas propounded by Bhartrhari. Several scholars have expressed this particular point, this particular concern. There are, however, certain points which Ferdinand de Saussure failed to capture, we can say, and therefore they remained untouched as far as modern linguistics is also concerned. There are several things that Bhartrhari has stated in his Vakyapadya, which are still quite relevant in the philosophy of language in general. There are certain principles stated laid down by Panini and developed by Bhartrhari, which are applicable universally, and they're extremely important, which can help explain away lots of phenomenon. So of late, I can tell you that a computer science student from Afghanistan asked me a question. The question was, is there an absolute meaning? And I had to think for a second, and I immediately replied saying that yes, according to the Indian grammatical tradition, there is an absolute meaning available. And then he probed further, and I could answer him on the basis of my study of Panini and Bhartrhari, and probably, and I felt he was satisfied by what I answered to him. So we say that there can be a related meaning, which is the meaning that we generally understand of a word, and then there could be an absolute meaning. So that meaning will stand with that word everywhere that word is uttered. So these are some of the extremely important ideas that we get from Bhartrhari and his works. Then we come to an important text called Kashika Vritti, composed by two scholars, Jayaditya and Vamana. This is the known complete commentary on the Ashtadhyayi, where each and every sutra is commented upon. The great Mahabhashya does, as I said to you, comments only on 1300 sutras, and there are references to 400 more sutras. So we can say that Patanjali comments on roughly around 1700 sutras. So what happens to the remaining 2300 sutras? How do we know what is the meaning of those sutras? What is the help we have? And the answer provided is that there is Kashika Vritti, which provides us help in understanding all those sutras, also not commented upon by Patanjali. Now, the significance of the Kashika Vritti is that this is a tradition, this is a text which also brings in the Buddhist grammatical systems. I mean, Buddhist grammatical thought into the Paninian grammatical system. This is the first commentary which was not transmitted orally. It was transmitted only in writing through manuscripts. And we have lots of manuscripts. We have collected lots of manuscripts of this text from all over the world. I personally have in my collection more than 200 manuscripts collected from all over the world of this particular text called Kashika Vritti. And they are written in different scripts like Malayalam, Kannada, Grantha, Telugu, Nandinagari, Tulu, Devanagari, and Bengali, Sharada, Nevari, and so on and so forth, and are available in almost all parts of India, and also are available abroad. This is an extremely important text called Kashika Vritti, followed by Jinendra Buddhi, who commented on this particular text called Kashika Vritti through his commentary called Nyasa or Kashika Vivarana Panjika. One of the interesting things about this Jinendra Buddhi is that he, of course, is a Buddhist scholar, a Buddhist monk, and he composed several texts. One manuscript of one of his texts was discovered in China, in Beijing, and of course, the then strained relationship of India and China did prevent the Indian scholars getting any access to this. It was, however, the Austrian Academy of Sciences in Vienna, scholars in that particular institute, they got hold of this particular manuscript, which was available in Tibetan, and then they published a manuscript, a text composed by this Jinendra Buddhi. That was a remarkable discovery some years ago. Nyasa explains several phenomena, several grammatical points, adding lots of philosophical insights, at the same time also adding a lot of Shabda Prakriya and definitely Artha Prakriya. I think now we have come to uh, probably um, an end to this talk. There are hardly 10 minutes remaining, so I would like to stop here. We have covered an area of more than 1,000 years, and there is quite a lot to say. But if you ask some questions, we might go there. Otherwise, I would summarize by saying that the field of linguistics, field of language studies in India, the field of language studies in at, with reference to the Paninian grammatical tradition is quite rich, and it also brought about a sea change. Rather, it brought about the birth of science of linguistics in modern India when the British scholars came into contact with this particular grammatical tradition. And the grammatical system developed by Panini inspires and keeps inspiring a uh, lot of modern information scientists and so on, computer scientists working in the field of natural language processing and so on and so forth. We at IIT Bombay are also involved in uh, doing a mathematical modeling of Paninian grammar. One of my students already submitted a dissertation and defended the dissertation, and the other two students are also they were following the same line and developing various aspects of Paninian grammar in this particular manner. So once again, I would like to thank you all for the patient listening. And with these summarizations, I would like to stop and would like to take some questions.
A very illuminating and interesting talk on the sort of research and analysis that goes into Sanskrit grammar. Um,
And this is not just, I mean, this is a generic system of analysis of any language that we find at an early date in India. I mean, these principles they got developed in the course of time, right? And multiple, it took multiple forms, catering for multiple variations available in multiple languages.
this point, we can take some questions. Participants can unmute themselves. I was thinking when you were discussing about this Panini and Katyayana's evolution of
Hmm,
the how some of the sutras were discarded by Katyayana,
hmm,
made me thinking. I mean, in general, as a more of a philosophical questions of how many languages actually die out and so on. I mean,
hmm.
this how does that fit in to their view? I mean, to some extent it looks like Panini and Katyayana were just recording systematically what was being used for communication.
Yes.
And in that sense, too, many languages, not just Sanskrit, many languages, old languages that are dying out, one sees it as a natural evolution of things. I mean, many have died out, and many will die out, and so on. And things will.
Yeah,
And a lot of modern languages have derived a lot of these rules, grammatical rules, grammar, words, everything from the past. So
yeah.
how does one try to understand that? Do people, or rather, what are some of the benefits that one should actively think about in trying to preserve these languages, or does one just view it as evolution, natural?
Yeah,
Something.
yeah. So the point is that the language loss has been a topic of study in modern linguistics. Uh, we can take a few we can take a few instances or few places where such loss happens. For example, when language contact happens, there are certain features which can get diluted, which can get removed, and so on and so forth. For example, um, uh, there are, I mean, the Indian languages and the South Indian languages, which are considered to be having the feature of agglutination, and some agglutination sometimes also gets lost. As far
What would
as
be agitation?
so, agglutination is a technical term used to describe South Indian languages where there are multiple words joined together in order to explain uh, certain concepts, certain sentences, and so on. It's like compounding, but in a bigger scale, on a bigger scale. Uh, so, some of those things get lost. So, the point is either a vocabulary item gets lost or a structure item gets lost. So when a vocabulary item gets lost, that is also a danger, but relatively lesser a danger, lesser an evil than when a structure item getting lost. That is generally considered to be a bigger loss. Bigger loss means the language is then completely lost. If you have lost a vocabulary, then probably I mean, you can bring it back in a certain way. Okay. But if the structure is lost, then your language is entirely lost. For example, I have noticed in the Kendriya Vidyalayas uh, all around, and I don't know if you have Kendriya Vidyalaya on the campus of Ayuka or not. I don't know that. Um, but definitely in all IITs, etc., we have Kendriya Vidyalayas. And the medium of instruction is English and Hindi and so on. So we observe, for example, kids speaking Marathi in their homes. They go to KVs and they come back with a lot of Hindi-eyed Marathi, right? So they are speaking Hindi. Their head is full with ideas of Hindi, and they are fitting in some Marathi phenomenon into it. That is how they start to speak. And then we need to take care of the language if we want to. Then we try to talk to them and say that, well, why don't you use this structure first instead of I mean, let's say this is the vocabulary, you can easily grasp it, but first try to grasp this structure. For example, in Hindi, we always say bina dekhe. Okay, so this is dekhe is an infinitive element, and we say bina dekhe, bina jane, bina sune, and these kinds of constructions are very much prevalent. In Marathi, we don't have these constructions. In Marathi, we say बघितल्या शिवाय, ऐकल्या शिवाय, जाणल्या शिवाय. This is how we construct. So we add the word shivai, meaning without, which is bina, of course. Now, uh, when kids learn this structure in Hindi, they try to impose it on Marathi. So kids speaking Marathi, coming from Kendriya Vidyalaya, we observe that they constantly keep saying bina khaye, bina piye, and so on and so forth. So then we request them, if you want to speak native Marathi, please consider speaking this particular structure. Try to put this in your head. Don't try to replace the Marathi structure by the Hindi structure. Okay. If you do that, then you probably save the structure. If this structure is lost, then the entire language is lost. Suppose there is some vocabulary loss, then still it is a lesser evil, we can say. And that is how, in language contact, certain phenomena happen and certain losses happen, and they of course can be also recovered in this particular manner. If you know where if the loss is happening, then probably you can take action and try to keep it as minimal as possible. Now, of course, because of the advent of the digital technology, quite a lot of things are disappearing, right? Quite a lot of nuances in our own languages, they are disappearing. So now we are not uh, used to reading texts, reading newspapers. Now we surf them, right? So see, the language is also changing.
But new structures also emerge. I don't know whether at the same rate or whether of the same quality, but
No, that we don't know, but at least the language is changing.
yeah.
So earlier we used to say, let me read the newspaper. Now you don't say, let me read the newspaper. Now you say, let me surf, right? So we are already losing read. And probably in English, you may not because you may use some other word, but in native languages, we are losing this.
Okay. Do you mean both the habit and the word, or just the word?
Yeah, yeah, the habit, of course, but the word is what is primarily important for us right
Yeah,
now.
that's true.
So in Marathi, we say वाचणे. So Vartamanpatra Vatsane. Now this Vatsane has got multiple meanings. One of the meanings is to read the newspaper carefully. So reading between the lines, we are
Right.
losing that now. If we use
Yes.
this in Marathi, kids probably wouldn't understand what we are saying. We are lost. We have lost it now.
Mm.
I mean, this process continues. Some new forms come in and all that. That is true. But due to the advent of such technological elements, uh, this happens. I mean, this is how
Essential
it gets
structures
lost.
sometimes get lost. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I can see that it is due to this abundance of knowledge or information that makes us want to search rather than actually read.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There is also another facet.
But that did Katyayana also notice the loss of structures and decided to like update it or
Yes, so
only lost the words?
yeah, yeah. So Katyayana definitely noted such losses of structures also. But he was a very pragmatic grammarian, and so he just noted them down. And
Mm.
as a result, he said that the sutras which talk about such losses, they let them be let them become obsolete. That's what he said. Then he suggested some uh, creative elements. He added some new elements to the existing sutra. He says that add this word to the sutra. That will take care of, or add this instruction to the sutra. This is to be applied only in this particular domain and not in the entire domain because partial domain loss is available.
More of an objective work without imposing any philosophy into it.
Absolutely, yeah. Of
That's
course, we don't know other things also. Whatever we have received in the course of time says this. He might have composed something else, but that we have lost.
I see. Mm. Yeah, considering all this is 100, 100 BC, 300 BC and so on, sure, a lot of it is lost.
Yeah, yeah, and also the algorithmic style of it, the computational style of it, input and output mechanism, that is something remarkable.
Mm.
Very,
I
very
don't
remarkable.
know. The example of yours made it more clear for me.
Yeah,
Otherwise, it's a bit abstract.
yeah,
Okay, there's a question. I think there's a hand raised by Dr. Nayak.
yeah.
Please unmute yourself.
So though Sanskrit contains many things about science and technology, but in India itself, Sanskrit is not mother tongue of any part of India. So
Yes,
how you
that is
think
true.
we will spread and that we make Sanskrit as a language for all science and technology all over India? How it is possible? Uh,
So, who says this? I didn't say this. Uh, if somebody wants to say this, let them defend. I will not say this. And so I don't think I'll be able to also defend it. It's not possible.
okay.
But But imagine you want to have some terminology to be coined, which could be pan-Indian. Okay, probably you can use this technique of the grammar, right? Paninian grammar, where there is an input and output mechanism already available to you. Why don't you want to use it? Just because it's Sanskrit? So it's labeled as something and then removed. I wouldn't do that.
All right.
Okay.
Then the questions, I think we'll
Yeah. So for example, there is an institution established by the government of India called Commission for Scientific and Technical Terminology.
Okay.
Okay. This is established in Delhi primarily to coin uh, terms for Hindi primarily, uh, where developments in science and technology proposes new technical terms to be used. So how will we do it in Hindi?
Hmm.
And so this commission undertakes this task and has published more than 70 glossaries.
Hmm.
And at IIT Bombay, we have been working at giving it a digital shape, and so on and so forth. And it is now available in the digital format. And I hope many states are also working along the same lines. Maharashtra at least is working on the same line. Maharashtra also has developed such terminologies for Marathi, and many other states must have also developed such terminologies. Now, there is an article in the Indian Constitution, Article 351, which clearly spells out that for developing this kind of technical terminology, you can take help of such grammatical resources. And it takes the name of Sanskrit, of course, says that why don't you use the grammar composed in Sanskrit to develop such terminologies? They could be acceptable pan-India. I mean, it is possible.
Hmm. Right. That's true. I'll write to you separately, but you could probably identify some interesting reading material or
Yeah,
references where we can people who are not into research of it but would like to get a sort of a popular view of how understanding of what sort of research goes on, and
yeah,
also some of the things that you think might be important for us, the
sure.
educators in general. That would be great.
Sure, sure. And as we are unmuting ourselves and opening our videos, let me propose a vote of thanks to the institution once again for giving me this wonderful opportunity. As I said in the beginning, on Monday, to take me back to Ayuka, Inter-University Center for Astronomy and Astrophysics, where I did work with Professor Narlikar for some time. It's a remarkable and wonderful experience. I really thank you and the institution for giving me this wonderful opportunity to talk to all these distinguished scholars. Thank you very much.
Have a good night, and thank you
Thank you.
very much for
Thank you
joining,
all. Yeah, all
and
the best.
everyone else. Bye.
Bye.